Welcome back today as we're returning to our series, How Sweet the Sound, and we're talking about the Christmas carol, O Little Town of Bethlehem. A very, it's a very peaceful, calming tune. It's interesting that the song, the carol, has a different tune in Europe than it does in the U.S. So the story goes that the Episcopal priest, Phillips Brooks, was in Jerusalem for Christmas one year, in 1865 actually. And he rode on horseback into the fields outside of Bethlehem where the shepherds were supposed to have seen the angels in that field. And then he participated in the Christmas service at the site there in Bethlehem, the place of the Nativity, which is actually a cave. And so he was just very much impressed by the night. Of course, being there at Christmas, you would very much feel and walk in the story. And so that is what inspired the words. And here they are. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. Beautiful words, simple words, intended simply as even a children's Christmas carol, and really with no intention of it going any further. Both he and the organist that he relied upon for the tune didn't believe that the hymn would last or the carol would last beyond the Christmas that they actually sang it in their church in 1868, actually. The tune was actually written on a Saturday night and practiced on a Sunday morning. It was that quick and that thrown together. But in that tune and in those words, we capture something of Bethlehem that night. And I call it hope. I mean, when I think of Bethlehem, I think of just small town. You know, I grew up in small towns. I've ministered in small towns most of my life. And I just know how small towns are. I know how really small towns are, and that's what I think of Bethlehem. The people in small towns they have worries, they have cares, they work hard. You know, when they go to bed at night, they are concerned for tomorrow and frustrated with the day they just had. And so that's how I see Bethlehem that night. The sun sets, the night falls, and they have just put in another day, just like any other day. And then this couple comes into town, and the young woman is pregnant, very pregnant. In fact, she's in labor. She's about to give birth. But the town's already just exploding from all the people who've had to return there because of the harshness of its own government. And so there's just no room for Joseph and Mary. And in the end, and even though it sounds brutal, no room for hope. Because often hope comes to us wrapped in a crisis. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no lodging available to them. You know, no one would have noticed. If heaven hadn't made a big deal about what was happening, no one in Bethlehem would have known. The shepherds wouldn't have known. It would have just flown on the radar, and only Mary and Joseph, enduring their crisis, the one that started when God said to Mary, "You are beloved of the Lord. You are highly favored." And that's when all the trouble began for Joseph and Mary, and now they come to Bethlehem, still in crisis and having been in crisis ever since God spoke. When Joseph and Mary showed up, it was just one more needy couple. And when life is full and the government is harsh and times are hard and people are cynical and hopeless in general, it's hard to make room for one more needy couple. But this couple was bringing something that no one could see. It wrapped in all that crisis and all that hardship and even all the simple darkness of the night was hope. Hope came, even though no one expected it. No one even believed it would come anymore. It didn't matter. Hope still came. You see, what the world calls a crisis, God uses as an opportunity to bring hope. In fact, how he does it is just like he does with Joseph, or like he did with Joseph and Mary. They came to that town pregnant with Jesus. They were about to bring Jesus into their world. And that's how God brings hope to our world. He brings Jesus through us. All of us have the power in us by God's Spirit to bring Jesus into our world, to bring hope into our darkness. Then the angels have returned to heaven, and the shepherds said to each other, "Let's go to Bethlehem. Let's see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." And they hurried to the village and found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in the manger. I have to ask myself, hope came, hope is here, but now, in this case, hope was there. The shepherds were in the field just doing their jobs, doing their thing, getting through their existence, but they didn't even have roofs over their heads unless they slept in a cave or under a tree. But it was to them that the angels appeared. The angels didn't appear in the town square or in the center of Bethlehem. The angels came to the outsiders, the guys who didn't really fit anywhere, the shepherds. And that's who God sent the message to. And I think that really speaks to something powerful for all of us. The Bible says this in Corinthians. Instead, God chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And he chose the things that are powerless to shame those who are powerful. God's kind of for the underdog. He's always working with simple, ordinary people. And so that's who the shepherds were. They were men and they were people out in the fields that God went to, and there was nothing really special about them other than they got to see something and they got to hear something. But then they left where they were. The angels went back into heaven, the scriptures tell us, and the shepherds said, "Hey, we need to go where the hope is. We need to go into Bethlehem and see what these angels were singing about." I can just see these shepherds traipsing, bursting through Bethlehem, making all kinds of noise, knocking on doors, trying to find the barn that the Son of God was born into, the hope of the world. I don't imagine they were very quiet about it, but they were willing to go where the hope was. They were willing to leave what they knew to go find hope. And that speaks a lot to them, and it is very strong for us. It teaches us that God is for you. You might be the black sheep of your family. You might be the hot mess. But God's still for you. God is for that underdog, the person who's behind, who's messed up. But also it teaches us that when we know of hope and we know there can be hope, we should go find the hope. We should go look for it. We should not just take peace in the fact that it's there. We should embrace it and hold it. After seeing him, the shepherds told everyone what had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. All who heard the shepherd's story were astonished, but Mary kept all these things in her heart and thought about them often. The shepherds went back to their flocks, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen. It was just as the angel had told them. I want to encourage us all to never lose hope. Like these shepherds, to find the hope and share the hope. And like Mary, to think about it often and hold it close to our heart. And so as you think about this song today, this "O Little Town of Bethlehem," and you think of this quiet city that hope arrived in, that light shined in the darkness, I just want you to remember that there is hope. And I want you to think for yourself, do you have hope? And if you do you share hope? Thank God we have hope.